life in America kind of starts getting back to normal, except now we have a whole generation of baby boomer babies about to become the new population. And all the cereal companies can think of at this point is, if we get those kids early, they're gonna become lifelong customers. And so the cereal race is on. And what does the Kellogg's company do to boost sales? Well, the one thing that has worked for them once before, adding sugar. But this time they got TV to tell everyone about it.
Faster than Kellogg's exciting new cereal, Sugar Frosted Flakes. Big crunchy flakes of corn with sparkling sugar on every flake, and always ready to eat. All you need is milk or cream, or eat them right out of the box.
I'm just gonna argue that by introducing Sugar Frosted Flakes, they dropped the word sugar from the name later on, Kellogg's turned the cereal race into a sugar race. Their competition, of course, followed, introducing more and more brands like Frosty O's, Sugar Jets, Quisp, Monster Cereal, Cocoa Pebbles, you name it. But the crazy thing is, even though these products became highly processed and loaded to the brim with sugar, they were still marketed as the healthy breakfast option. And unfortunately, it took government agencies quite a long time to finally start setting some rules on how cereal companies can describe, market, and call their products. And when they finally did, that ship had sailed a long time ago. All people wanted, especially a kid, were brightly colored and absurdly sweet cereals. Which is extremely ironic if you consider what the original intentions of Graham, Jackson, and Kellogg were. It was only in this 21st century that mainstream consumers started slowly considering more healthy cereal options for breakfast. Like, for example, there's the comeback of mildly sweetened actual granola, or the rise of muesli, which is of course the slightly healthier European cousin of American breakfast cereal. But I was a cereal eating kid in the early 90s, so I definitely remember craving the brightly colored and sweet stuff. And one of the brands I remember liking the most are, of course, Fruit Loops. Turns out they've been around since the 1960s with originally only 3 colors, that's yellow, orange, and red, with purple, blue, and green being added later on. Now, funnily enough, these are modern-day German or European Fruit Loops with only 3 colors, because apparently Europeans are less willing to accept neon-colored cereals, I guess. But as we've learned, it doesn't even matter because they all taste the same anyway. Now, with all of that history in mind, I know that was a big one. I told you I did some research to see if we could come up with a version of homemade Fruit Loops that A, are 100% natural, and B, where each color will correspond to a different flavor. The goal was not to make them taste like the original or super amazing or whatever. The goal was to see what a wholesome homemade Fruit Loop could actually taste like. And for that, let's begin with the cereal part. We're mostly going to be using oats, but we'll also add some all-purpose flour, which contains gluten and will help the structure, as well as finely milled corn flour, which I think has the signature mildly sweet note that you get with most cereals. The oats, of course, are way too coarse, so we're first going to put them in a blender and turn them into a fine oat flour. After combining all the grains together, we do want to add a little bit of sugar, just a tad. I mean, come on, we want this to taste like something. We balance those out with a bit of salt, and I also added baking powder, which will work as a leavener to help us get an airier texture. Whisk until homogeneous, and that is our Fruit Loop cereal base mix. The next part will be actual fruits. I want to go for 4 different colors, so here are 4 different flavors. For red, I'm gonna go with cherries. All I could find were frozen cherries because they're kind of out of season now. Then apple and kiwi will be our green flavor. Blueberry will make, a blue Fruit Loop, I hope. And then for the yellow one, I went with orange and mango. The first step will be to turn them into a puree. For that, I'm adding them to a blender with a drop of vegetable oil. My thinking with the oil here is that as we blend everything together, it's gonna emulsify into the puree and carry more of the fruit aroma. That's because fat is actually much better at absorbing and storing fragrances than water. You can also add extra color for a brighter punch, and a great natural yellow coloring is turmeric, but nuh-uh. I highly recommend not to use turmeric in plastic or wooden cookware because it's gonna stain everything yellow, like brightly yellow, and you will never ever fully get it out. So we're gonna blend everything into a sort of smoothie. You see how it's getting kind of pale? Well, once we add turmeric in a glass bowl, by the way, not anymore. We'll do the same to apple and kiwi, and as a green food coloring, I'm gonna be using chlorella, which is a seaweed extract. You could also use a bit of pureed spinach as a coloring, I suppose, but what you're you're seeing here is a deep-ass green you're never gonna get with those. The cherries actually turned out to be the easiest. They don't even need any extra color. They already look Tarantino red as they come. But now the blueberries, they're a highly interesting case because as you blend them, you'll notice that their juice is indeed not blue at all. And that posed a highly interesting challenge because what natural food coloring is there that is actually bright blue? Blue is a color you almost never find in edible things, like naturally. Except there's this one ingredient, and only one that I know of, that can actually do the job. Enter the mysterious butterfly pea flowers. These are a variety of blossoms from the clitoria plant, which gets its name from its particular shape. Now, these are found in parts of Asia, and when you add hot water, you can get a tea with an incredibly unique color and a very boring taste, but that's not what we're here for. I mean, check that out. If you think that looks fake, wait until you see what happens if you add a drop of anything acidic in there. Exactly. But I did not just show you that trick simply because it looks cool. I mean, I kind of did. But here's the thing. Most fruits, and that of course includes berries, are actually slightly acidic or a lot acidic, and that's gonna mess with our results. That's on top of the fact that we already have the purple color of the blueberries to work against. So, in addition to adding a bit of super strong butterfly pea tea, I'm also gonna add a little bit of baking soda, which of course is alkaline, to counteract the acidity. I know this still looks very purple, but don't worry, it's gonna mellow out as we move along. So, with our 4 different flavors and color purees all set, it's time to turn them into a sort of dough. Simply add an equal amount of cereal base mix by weight and combine into a homogeneous mass. The colors will all change a little bit at this point, especially check out the blueberry. It literally goes from purple to blue in front of your eyes as you lower the overall acidity by mixing it with the grains. The doughs are obviously way too sticky at this point to do any kind of meaningful work with them, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna shape them into sheets and pre-cook those so they firm up. For that, you want to get a couple of small trays and grease them. I used coconut oil. Then use a wet offset spatula to spread a thin layer of Fruit Loop dough on each of the trays. Keep it nice and flat and even, somewhere around 2 to 3 millimeters. Now to cook them, we need to basically drop them in a hot water bath, which requires a bit of creativity. I used a deep casserole pan and put that straight on my stove, which is a bit more adventurous than what I'm comfortable with, but hey, it worked. Now, drop your sheets in one by one and let them cook through, roughly 7 minutes each. Half of our mixture is starch, which gelatinizes around 80 degrees Celsius, so that's all we're looking for at this stage. You could technically try doing this in the oven, but the boiling water actually provides a very consistent and even heat transfer with a maximum temperature of 100 degrees, which is perfect. You're gonna need to rest the pre-cooked sheets of Fruit Loop dough in the fridge for like 30 minutes or so to let them fully settle and firm up. After which we're gonna get to what is undoubtedly the most laborious part of this process, the shaping. You will need 2 ring-shaped objects to use as stencils. I picked the lid of a chapstick for the big loop and then a metal straw for the small one, and then you get to work. The loops you're gonna get are still very soft and will also taste pretty floury and not very great. So your very last step is gonna be to toast these in the oven, super low temperature, somewhere around 125 Celsius, because we want pretty much 0 browning on these to keep the nice and bright colors. It took me around 45 minutes to get these nice, dry, and toasty without burning them, and if they're still a little bit soft on the inside, then turn your oven to an even lower temperature, like 60 degrees maybe, and just like let them dry up and firm up for like another half hour. Or if you want to be extra safe, you can put those in a dehydrator, but the oven should work just fine. Now let's actually get to the final resolution of my Fruit Loops journey, which is of course tasting my homemade Fruit Loops with milk. Well, since I had to make each one of those by hand, I don't have that many, and that's the reason why I'm gonna go over to the other camera now and pour some milk over them to show you guys, because I don't have enough to make a separate close-up. So here they are, and now I'm gonna pour some milk over them. Ooh. Look at those! Those are homemade Fruit Loops! Okay, here I am back with my demo cereal, and then here we of course have the opponent, which is the commercial Fruit Loops, Kellogg's Fruit Loops. I think the first thing we all notice immediately is the difference in color. The commercial ones are like neon colored and bright, while the homemade ones are, I mean, you can clearly tell the different colors, but they're much more mellow. I'm gonna establish a baseline by testing the commercial product first, so cheers. Yeah, Fruit Loops. Classic. That's the flavor I remember. It's like this very nondescript general fruit flavor, which I'm just gonna call generic citrus or something. Quite sweet, but not too bad actually. But now the big question is, of course, how does the homemade cereal stack up? And I have not tried this with milk, like for real. First of all, it tastes like actual cereals, like porridge or something, and it also tastes like fruit. So that one, I think we achieved. I'm getting some actual cherry flavor. Why am I so surprised? The more I eat, the better they taste, for sure. So I'm gonna say that the biggest difference between these two is actually not so much in flavor. I mean, they obviously taste quite differently, but I would say like the homemade ones are still recognizable as Fruit Loops when you eat them. But the biggest difference is in texture. The commercial ones are just extremely light and puffy, you know, almost like puffed rice. And they do indeed undergo that kind of processing during manufacturing. The problem is that this involves some pretty complex machinery with like high pressure and yada yada, which I didn't want to go there for this video. I tried to get around that one, but obviously even with baking soda, we would have needed more puffiness in the homemade Fruit Loops. But other than that, I mean, they're Fruit Loops, they're all natural. They get soggy in milk anyway, so what's the difference? I think I'm starting to get the difference. You need to chew a lot longer. But hey, the upshot is, they actually taste like fruit. Yes. Not all the fruits are equally prominent. Mango comes through pretty well, and definitely cherry. Not getting a lot of apple, and also not getting a lot of blueberry, unfortunately. But I'm getting a lot of wholesome oat flavor. Final verdict, would I recommend doing this at home? I'm not sure. Maybe not. I mean, it's a lot of work, and you don't get a lot of Fruit Loops doing that, and then when you do, they don't even... I mean, they taste good, but it's like, it's not the same craveable experience. So yeah, maybe if you want healthy Fruit Loops, just buy some healthy granola and add some fruits, like some actual fresh fruit, and you're gonna be just fine. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.